Okay, so this is me. My name is Lyla. I am the manager of product marketing at JazzHR. Sometimes it's product marketing manager. Sometimes it's manager, product marketing. I'm not really sure what the difference is, but if someone could tell me, that would be great. I have it listed a bunch of different places. So I started out in customer success, so I have a super customer-centric approach to our trial program, and a user-centric approach, I guess, since they're not really a customer yet. But just to give you some background on why I got driven this way. So just so I know who I'm talking to, because I'm going to be talking a lot about some marketing stuff, which I hope doesn't offend any product people, but can you raise your hands if you're in product? Okay. What about marketing? All right, hey guys. Sales or any customer success or anything? All right, right on, cool. All right, so there's a mix. Product people, I promise you won't be bored or anything. It's definitely a cross-functional thing between the two, but I do talk a lot about marketing. Oh, and about our company, I guess, just a brief background. We are a hiring software, so you may have heard ads all the time for ZipRecruiter and every podcast you've ever listened to, or on the radio and TV. We partner with companies like ZipRecruiter to help people get candidates and then bring them into our software so that they can track them. If you've ever applied to a job online, you've probably used hiring software like ours before, but we specifically focus on small to medium-sized businesses. And a lot of our users are coming from not having any software to do this at all. So they're small companies, they have one or two users that are actually driving this, and then they have a bunch of people coming in and screening resumes. Like if you guys interview or hire for your jobs, and maybe you have access to a tool like ours already, and you're going in and you're leaving your notes on people's interviews and things like that. So that's what we do. So I do use a lot of references to job stuff, just so you know. Okay, and one other small housekeeping item. If you have any questions or comments or you want to share anything, just feel free to shoot your hand up and share it. I like that this is not a webinar, which is normally what I do, where people have that really annoying hand raise thing in a webinar software. If you guys, has anyone ever used that to actually raise their hand? Yeah, I'm always just put them down. So I apologize if anyone's ever been on a webinar with me and I've put your hand down, but I can't stand that hand raise thing. It drives me nuts. I don't really know what purpose it serves. Okay, so why are we here today? We all had some interest in learning how to build a trial program. The description and the abstract says it's user-focused, so this is our trialer. Her name's Danielle, and we're going to use her as an example as we go through this. Okay, so the great thing about trialers is that they are ready, willing, and able to buy, right? A lot of times, especially if you're in sales or marketing, marketing's like, hey, here's all these great leads, and sales are like, these leads all suck. And you're like, no, they're great. But trialers are really great because they actually are ready to buy for the most part, right? They're raising their hand and saying, hey, I'm interested in your product, and I actually took some steps to show that. They already know they have a problem too. A lot of times marketing and sales is spent on educating your buyer and saying hey, this is why you need us. We're really great. We can help you, I promise. Just come check us out. Come sit and listen to a demo. Come join our trial. But trialers are like, hey, I already found this out. I Googled best ATS, best applicant tracking system, and you guys came up, so I started a trial. So she knows how to solve it. In our particular case, Danielle has one resume inbox, basically, if you've ever tried to apply to a job, and they're like, submit your resume to careers@jazzhr.com, and you're like, oh, I'm never going to do that. She was managing that for a bunch of remote teams. So she had I think 50, when she started, remote employees that she was trying to hire more and have them screen resumes just in an email inbox. So she knows she has a problem. And this is super important as well because you're not spending so much time educating them. So I really like trialers is my point. She also has the means, right? So when I say ready, willing, and able, she is able. If she started a trial, she most likely either has the authority or the money to buy your product, right? So we actually have a form on our trial program. Her form is too long, but that's beside the point. Whenever you sign up, there's a drop-down checklist, not a drop-down checklist, those are two different things. They're drop-down, and you select one of the options of why you started the trial. We have stuff like, I need to get better candidates, I need to streamline my process. And one of the options is just kicking the tires. And sometimes whenever people are talking about starting a trial, they're like, oh, we're just gonna get a lot of people just sort of futzing around. And while that may be true for certain industries, That's going to be my caveat throughout the entire thing because everybody's different. We saw whenever we had the option just kicking the tires in our drop-down list, less than 4% of people chose that. So most of our trialers are actually ready to buy a solution. So now what? Right? She's ready, she's willing, she's able, she filled out our form, she probably got her login information. So there are so many opportunities here to gather info, communicate, get data, to set her up for success. So the most important thing before you start any project, obviously, is to define your goals. So luckily, we have Pendo now, so we can track a lot of these goals. But when we started this project, we didn't have that. But it makes it a lot easier to measure and track this kind of information. So you would be using a combination of your CRM and Pendo to get this data. So for those of you who are in specifically product and you're not necessarily working in your CRM, I do have some tips on like what you need to be looking for and what reports you can ask for to kind of confirm this information. So activation rate. This has a couple different definitions, but this is the one that I like, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So the percentage of trialers who complete key conversion activities is how I think of activation rates. So how many trialers are actually going in and using your product, and how many are completing important actions in your app? Are they going through and completing the core loop of features that people who are active power users are going in and completing every day? Are they just going in and like kind of mindlessly clicking around? Kind of what are they doing in there? And what's a good benchmark? I always like to talk about this, but benchmarks are really hard, especially for trials, because things are so wildly different. There's a ton of different variables, like your industry, your users, what they're doing. But I would say anywhere between 15 to 30% is a good range. That's kind of like a wide range, but I definitely think that's a good place to start. If you're seeing numbers that are way lower than that, you obviously have a lot of opportunity that you can work and do cool stuff. And if you're seeing numbers way higher than that, then definitely you should be up here, because ours is about like 27% or something like that. So if yours are higher than 30, please tell me what you're doing. I've also seen activation rates defined as just successfully using the product. That's literally a definition I've seen. That feels kind of hard to quantify for me, but if you guys can come up with a definition of what that means. Some people say that's just login frequency, that's login duration, number of clicks, things like that. For us, that didn't actually tell us anything, because we have some really non-technical users that would log into our trial and just start clicking around furiously for like 25 minutes and literally did nothing. There were some things that we found were UX issues, but we also found that people just didn't really know what to do and they really needed a lot of help. So conversion rate, pretty straightforward. This is the number of trialers who buy. You can use Pendo to report on this data. I prefer to use Pendo with a combination of our CRM. If you're pulling Salesforce information into Pendo, you can find this out pretty quickly. But if you need to use a combination of both, this is a really important number. So, what's a reasonable trial conversion rate? It again completely depends. You can grab benchmarks online if you are curious, like something in your industry, but anywhere from 25 to 50% is generally a good number. I know it's like super wide range. We are at about 30%, and it's equal to our demo requests. So we're trying to drive that up more, but I'm the only one who does all of our trial stuff, literally all of it. So I don't have a team. But I have seen when we started out, we were at less than 2%. So it's possible to boost it up pretty quickly if you have absolutely nothing in place, especially, or if you have just garbage that's in there now. I mean, and goals are just goals, right? You can iterate on them. And my favorite acronym, ARPU. Yeah, I'm just gonna let that sit for a minute. So ARPU is super important because it tells you how much your trialers are worth. Are your trialers going in, and I know for product people, you're probably like already asleep as soon as like dollars and coins come up on the screen. But this is super important because if your trialers are going in and you have maybe multiple plan levels and they're buying the lowest plan and you're not able to cross-sell, you're not able to upsell them, then it's going to be super difficult to prove the value of building out a good trial program or even your trial in general, right? So we actually found that our trialers convert to higher ARPU, so they're worth more to us. We think this is because they're able to see the product and they're not talking to salespeople and maybe negotiating discounts and things like that. They're just going in through our e-commerce and self-service and purchasing it because they're like, okay, well, I don't really want to interact with a salesperson and I really like this product. I'm able to see the value. I'm getting candidates. I'm screening them. Everything's great. I have my career page. So yeah, $3.99 a month, I'm down. Sign me up for a year, right? If they go through a sales rep, they tend to shorten the sales cycle, but so they buy faster, but they also pay less money. So this is a good thing to kind of pay attention to whenever you're building out these programs. So how do we find a lot of this data? These are some of the things I've already touched on a little bit. In your CRM, you're going to want to know your MRR, so your monthly recurring revenue if you're a subscription company. Contract length, so like I mentioned before, there is, with the trial program, your buyers could buy at a higher MRR, but for a less contract length. So we found that that's true as well. Salespeople, they'll often purchase like 3-year contracts, but through the trial program, they'll go month to month because they liked it and they bought it, but they're not really ready to commit because they just didn't really have that personal experience that you would have through a sales rep. So this is just important stuff to keep track of, even if you're in product, because when you're thinking about maybe designing a new checkout page or designing the experience where someone actually goes to purchase and what they need to do, how you can put those things that you're seeing or not seeing in your data up front. Right? So it required, whenever we rebuilt our checkout experience, it was a really tight collaboration between product and marketing. Sales team engagement is another thing I have here. If we found that our sales team, if they were engaged with a trialer, it really shortened the length of the sales cycle. And one thing about trials, depending on how long your sales cycle is, ours is pretty quick. Not as fast as we would like it, but we found that sales team engagement rapidly decreased the length of our sales cycle. So having a salesperson reach out to a trialer, get in touch with them, talk to them, made that way shorter. People who are just trialing and wouldn't respond to any of our outreach stayed the full 21-day length of the trial, sometimes waited for it to expire and us to be like, hey, your trial expired, your trial expired, your trial expired, and then they'll buy it. And then the rest of the data is found in Pendo, right? So login frequency, duration, I know I said that those don't necessarily indicate things for us, but maybe it does for you. Maybe you find that after 8 minutes a day in the trial, they're much more likely to convert into a paying customer. Or if they log in 5 times a day for some ungodly reason. All of that can be found in Pendo, right? Completed actions, their user type. It's super important to track their user type and title. We found that if a VP, for example, is the first person to start a trial with us, the likelihood of them buying is almost nothing. But if an HR manager or someone who's like actually doing the work on a day-to-day basis goes in and starts a trial and adds their VP, they're almost certain to buy. So paying attention to that information is extremely valuable. I always bubble that up and segment by that whenever I'm creating segments in Pendo. I want to know exactly what titles, and I'm pulling this information from Salesforce, by the way. I want to know like who my users are, not just their user type as in like, admin, user, those types of things, although that is also important. But you rarely find people, I don't know about every single trial, but you'll rarely find people adding people at lower level user types in a trial. It's pretty uncommon. Okay, so Danielle, she's bored out of her mind listening to us talk about metrics all the time while she's trying to recruit. So she's done a couple things so far, right? She was able to post a job, which for us is huge. That's one of our key conversion activities. This means she's able to get candidates, which almost immediately proves the value of our software. If you guys are thinking about some other ones that you might have, like, what immediately shows the value to people? Is it like that aha moment that they have whenever they use your software? She also invited a team member. You'll notice if you start almost any trial, there are tons of calls to action to do this whenever you start a trial, because pretty much for everybody, if you add someone else into your trial, it's a pretty good indicator that you're really interested in that product. If you think about how many trials you've started and you started it and you're like, this is kind of crap, and I'm not going to add anyone else in and I'm never going to log in again. So reducing the friction to inviting a team member and including that in your marketing materials and your sales team communications is super important. We actually noticed that we had a UX problem. So product people, this is important, I promise you. We had a UX problem with adding a user into our system. So initially we saw that our conversion rates for trials were very low and people were not adding people in at all. We had two problems we realized from a product standpoint. We didn't have enough granular user permissions. So people couldn't even add someone in and not show them all the billing information. So if I'm a VP and I started my trial and I just want to go in and add my HR manager because she's the one who's actually going to be using it, but I don't want her to see credit card information or something like that, I had no way of doing that. So we fixed that problem. And then we realized that there's also a variety of UX issues. People couldn't find the button to add someone into the system without a walkthrough. They couldn't find an easy way to verify their email when the email came in. The login page was terrible. They couldn't easily find their password whenever they got a password emailed to them. You guys ever had that when you had like your password emailed to you? But then we changed it so they just click verify and sign in and they can create their password. So we redesigned emails, we redesigned the login page, and we redesigned where you actually add a user into the system. And that more than doubled the amount of people we had completing those key conversion actions. Right? So this is super important. And like I said, you'll see this a lot in trials, people asking you to do this. Ideally, it would be a one-click thing where you, at least in our scenario, you'd put someone's email in and then they wouldn't have to do anything else. Right? Ours is like kind of a form when you add someone in, if you ever had to add someone else. And Pendo's is really easy. I wish it was more like that. Okay, and the last thing is creating a careers page. For us, this was super important because it gives the user like a sense of ownership over what she's just created, especially for people who have nothing before. If they were just using like an inbox recruiting style where they're giving an email address at like the bottom of their About Me page, they now have a branded careers page with their logo that's mobile friendly. It looks professional, so it's another aha moment, right? So anything that's like. But we actually didn't expect this to be a key conversion activity either, by the way. It's kind of hidden in our app, and it's not a user-friendly page. It's an old page. I don't know if you guys have like V1s and V2s of your apps that are sitting out there sort of intermingled, but we do. And this was on an old page, poorly designed, but people were doing it like crazy, and if they were doing it, it meant that they were going to buy. So we drive people to that page, and people still do it, even though it's not a great experience. So that's one of our things we know we need to work on. But we have walkthroughs at the wazoo. Okay. So we found when we were doing a bunch of research, and like I said, this was before I had Pendo. So I was just talking to Christina before. She doesn't have Pendo right now. So if she's going to do this, it's going to be a lot of mining the database, which is what I was doing before. And it took like 3 or 4 days to get requests back. But it was kind of a nightmare. But now I'm able to just run visitor reports, segmentation, and use paths and funnels to see if there are hangups in completing those key conversion activities. So this is definitely where the product people can be super valuable in helping sales and marketing to build out some of the communications, or tell them like if marketing comes back and says like, hey product, why aren't people branding their careers page? Why aren't people getting candidates? Like, oh, okay, well, there's a hang up where they don't know which button to click whenever they create a job or whatever. So knowing how people are using your product in the trial experience is super valuable. And then connecting that data with the business side of things really gives you a good argument.
How are you actually are you taking out of calculate
Yeah, so we do that in Salesforce for the most part. I have a few different dashboards and reports that I use that sort of tie in with all of our Pendo data. And then I pull it in Pendo to look at, where that's at in the system. So I don't usually pull any of the actual product data out of Pendo. The only thing I pull out for the most part is to give presentations to my colleagues, and that would be out of Salesforce for the most part. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful, but yeah.
So the path and funnel discussion, we're getting ready to roll out Pendo specifically for trial. And
nice.
The discussions we have on the table right now is that you look at your cohorts, right? You have the negative cohort trial and the positive cohort, possibly ones that you convert to paying customers.
Mm-hmm.
It's looking at, can you cluster the behavior? Can you figure out what are those paths of success?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was basically, for the recording, how can you tell what things and what features in Pendo do you use in order to get this data? So definitely number one for me when I started out was paths and funnels. The reason being that I know that I already know that we have some deep-seated UX issues. So my main concern was finding out, okay, because I already had a hunch about some of the key conversion activities. So I was using the paths and funnels to figure out, okay, who's actually, after they complete this task, is actually going to the subscription page or doing any of the other key conversion activities. That's one. Two is just looking at individual trial accounts and seeing what they're doing in the system and users. So I would create a visitor report on all of my trialers and go in and analyze what they're doing for those individual accounts. In terms of segmentation as well, I was using some comparisons for segmentation, like seeing trialers versus power users. That was really helpful for me to understand, what the core loops of our product are, who in our product is super successful, and where did they start out. And whenever I started this project and we actually implemented Pendo, I looked back at a power user that converted from a trial and was looking back at what she does on a daily basis. That was super helpful as well. You'll kind of have to slice and dice and see what works for you guys, but there is a little bit of manual digging in each individual account. I think that overall looking at reports are helpful, but understanding on an individual user or account level what people are doing and where they're getting caught up can be super helpful. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Okay. And I know I talk a lot about Salesforce and CRM, but it was super helpful. If you don't have it and you're just getting annoyed by me keep saying it, I'm sorry, but it was really nice to be able to see, because we are not able to pull some of the information like MRR or subscription length, things like that from our metadata in Pendo. We have to pull it from Salesforce. So knowing that whenever I'm looking at, for example, previous accounts that converted from a trial or whether or not they have high MRR, I want to know what they're doing in the account so I can sort of back apply that to the trial. All right, so we found that after all of this research that Danielle is 70% more likely to purchase JazzHR if she completes all of the key conversion activities. This was huge for us because we really didn't know why people bought. Like I said, we had no idea that creating a careers page would be an indicator that you're going to buy. We had some hunches, but you probably are going to have some hunches that you can sort of research. So this is kind of where the marketing part comes in. How do we complete people to, or drive people to complete KCAs? So through scalable, repeatable communications that drive, nudge, encourage, pester. Okay, maybe not pester your trialers, but if you're not driving them to complete those, especially in our scenario where we had pretty non-technical savvy users that maybe weren't always driven to sign into technology all day, especially if they don't have a software solution before, they don't really know to go in and look and log into something every day to check it out. So you have to start out with the kind of most work-intensive piece of this puzzle. This was the part that took the longest for me after all this. The analytics was pretty awful as well, but like I said, this was before we had Pendo, so it was kind of a disaster. But mapping out the trialer journey is a next big piece. And if you're in product specifically, I think this is something to work on with marketing. I actually did work with our product team on creating this. I wasn't a product marketing manager or whatever whenever I started this project. I had the title of Lifecycle Marketing Manager. I still don't know what that means. But I worked with product pretty heavily on this, UX and product to create this ideal trial journey. So You can use anything, a whiteboard, an Excel sheet, draw.io, PowerPoint, whatever works. There are so many tools to do this, and I think it's super important because you can have a full view of the communications that are happening in your trial, and kind of map those out on a day-by-day basis. They should be both time and action-based, all of your communications. So I feel like products should definitely have an opinion about these, even if you're not a marketing person driving these. As sales as well, especially if sales is being involved in a trial program as a part of your standard outreach program. So I have email, chat, in-app messaging, and sales interactions. And when I say in-app messaging, I'm referring to guides and things in Pendo. Yeah, so how did Danielle know to create a job? How did she know to invite her coworkers or customize her career page? This was all through communications. Before we built out a communication plan that was both time and action-based, really no one was going in and doing these things unless they were super, super savvy buyers, which is rare. So I just want to share this. This is one tiny piece of our workflow for emails that we use for our trial program. So you don't necessarily have to start out there. This is just a small part, and this was over a lot of time. But you can scale it down and work with one activity and move up from there. There's no reason to start super crazy like that. This was after months of working on it. And again, hopefully this would be a partnership project between marketing and sales. But like I said, they should be time and action-based, right? So after 7 days, if nobody is creating a job, send them an email to create a job, or give them salespeople contact information. If they have created a job, well, then you want to drive them in the next step. Hey, you created a job, that's awesome. Now go invite your coworkers, or whatever your next steps are. So everything should be both time and action-based. And guides. Okay, so I love guides. They're great. They really help us in the trial, and were pretty much instrumental in increasing our conversion rates. So this was, we originally started with WalkMe, and then we moved over to Pendo, and we exclusively bought WalkMe for the ability to do these in-app guides and walkthroughs, because we thought those would be instrumental, specifically the walkthroughs. But so we found welcome messages increased our conversion rates by 9%. Which is kind of crazy. But this is just a simple welcome message that whenever anyone was brand new to the system, they logged in and they saw their pretty transactional information here. It's their role type and their email address, which is also their login. But people loved it. And that button goes to a self-service onboarding portal that we created with videos, walkthroughs, and things like that. So we did a lot of self-service here. And guided walkthroughs, like I said, we thought that was going to be our sort of end-all, be-all to increasing trial conversion rates. And I talk about this with Blair all the time, that actually they are great, but they don't necessarily lead to people adopting those features, right? We saw that people were dropping off of our walkthroughs. I created these beautiful walkthroughs that were 25 steps. And they gave you every single detail you needed to know. I know, I was very enthusiastic. I was like, this is so cool. I don't have, because I used to be on customer success, right? So I'm actually walking these people through everything. So I'm like, oh great, this is gonna save me a phone call. I can just tell them to go complete this walkthrough, but nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to sit there and click through 100 different balloons to try and figure out what they have to do. And then, how many of you get to some of these trials and a little light box comes up and it centers in on one button and you're madly clicking out of it, right? That's not always the best experience. So we did a couple things. I found out whenever we switched over to Pendo how quickly people were dropping off. They're dropping off after 3 steps. Pretty much as soon as they reached the next page where they knew that they needed to do the action, they were just doing it on their own and figuring it out. There are a few people that would go through and complete them all, but my advice would be really, if you want to build out complex walkthroughs and you think that's going to be valuable for you guys, absolutely pay super close attention to it and do it in conjunction with your marketing team. Because we had product originally build a lot of these out, and they were very transactional. I love you guys, but it was very instructional versus kind of giving the value as well of why you want to do these. And make the first few steps amazing, because people are going to get bored immediately. The other thing is we put them in our guide center in Pendo, so they're not necessarily taking over your screen. It's not driving you to do it, with no option or no way out. You can sort of opt into these items if you need help. Yeah. Great question. So what I did was I added in some images to the first few balloons and really used some value-driven language, right? So not click here, go to this part. Like, hey, do you want to get more candidates? Do you want to organize your process? Like, head over here and we'll walk you through it. So I know that sounds kind of trivial, and for people who are all, at odds with marketing, you're like, bleh. But for us, it really did help. It really did help, right? As it does depend on your user, though, right? If you guys are like people who have software engineers and more technical people as users are probably like, ugh. But it just depends on your user. So really making sure that you know who your audience is and carrying over your marketing language into some of this stuff is super important, so they have a consistent sort of experience. Yeah.
Along those lines, to keep them short, we're brand new and I haven't said anything yet. But are you able to embed walkthroughs within walkthroughs, like an overall step for someone who might be able to just fill in a whole screen themselves, or if they need more information, they can actually then choose them?
That's a good question. Blair, do you know the answer to that question? Yes? Yeah? Yeah, we haven't done that before with like multiple steps, but I know our users would I think they would be terrified if they saw like a learn more and a button and a button. They need it pretty basic. Cool. Anything else about walkthroughs? I know that those are always a hot button item, but I'm here to tell you they're not going to rock your world. You should use guides instead. Okay, so Lightboxes and Alerts. These are my faves. I am a Lightbox and Alert queen now. I use them so much more than I use walkthroughs. I actually don't even pay attention to our walkthrough data anymore. I have 3 walkthroughs for our key conversion activities, and that's it. The rest of information that I give to people, I do it through Lightboxes and Alerts and tooltips and things like that. So we use them for a variety of things. I have some examples here that are also from not our trial, but like our current customers. I try not to do full screen takeovers. Just find that disruptive and annoying personally, so I try not to use them. I use the little guys that pop up in the bottom right of your screen and say like, hey, I have one thing that we noticed that really helped, especially for our users since they're not super tech savvy, and it also helped decrease the sales cycle, was having multiple touch points when their trial was about to expire. So if your trial is expiring in 7 days, it's like, hey, your trial is about to expire. Would you like to talk to a salesperson? And then there's just using polls, there's a little yes or no button. They click that, and then there's a zap that sends an alert through HubSpot to sales reps saying, hey, your trialer said that they wanted some more information or they wanted help or whatever. You can use polls to sort of take pulses throughout your trial of whatever information you might want to gather, especially if you're piloting this program. Maybe you want to know certain information about your users or what their plans are. The just kicking the tires type question, like that's on our trial form right now, but really shouldn't be. But you can put any questions like that in there as well. The polling feature I found to be super valuable, especially if it's just like one question. People will fill it out like crazy, at least for us. Yeah, so this is just a brief list of stuff that I use. We have a countdown banner as well at the top of our trial saying, hey, you have X many days left. This is actually hard-coded into the trial, into our app. Product and engineering built that. And it has a buy button at the top. And it's persistent across the entire app. So anywhere you're in the app, you're in a trial and you're going to buy. This is pretty common in trials. In expiring trial pop-up, we also have Concierge Onboarding that we offer in the trial, which is just as soon as they sign up and they've been in the trial for 2 days, they get a pop-up saying, hey, do you want Concierge Onboarding in trial? And it just, again, lets the salesperson know that this person has questions. That's been really successful as well. Weekly sales demo, experiment with weekly sales demos as well, group demos, and they can register right in the trial. So if you have anything like that, you can have that as well. Especially, you can also create individual sort of pop-ups or like tooltips at the top with the person's sales rep information, especially if you're integrating with Salesforce. You can create a segment that has everybody who's Blair's customers, and then you can have a pop-up with Blair's picture and his boot up there and say, here, here's my contact information. If you want to reach out to the sales rep, please give a shout out. And you can do that at any time. Yeah. So really for us, it's just a small pop-up in the bottom right, and then the concierge onboarding just alerts the salesperson that someone's interested, and really they give them just like a demo, and they'll upload things into their account for them and things like that. So it's really just like an excuse, like a marketing-y excuse to have the salespeople talk to someone who's in a trial. We have a hard time getting trialers to engage with sales reps. Generally, when trialers come in, they're the type of buyer that don't want to talk to somebody. So we try and give them every opportunity to know the picture thing has actually worked out for us pretty well. We've only done it for one sales rep, but he's seen way more outreach from trialers. I think just like the personal touch for us works really well. We also found that putting the picture of the sales rep in emails and things like that increased our open and click-through rates as well. So it depends on your buyer, though. For us, it's HR people, so they want to see people, right? Cool. Does anyone have anything on this list that they want to share or that they use or have questions about? Yeah.
I reach out release notes via Pendo.
Yeah.
At the very top, and keep them up for a week or two, and just kind of see if people are reading it or not, then we'll do further walkthroughs and whatnot.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great example. Release notes. Yeah, for sure. We use the Guide Center for that as well, in like the What's New section. You can push stuff there too. Yeah.
When you moved from WalkMe to Pendo, were you able to reuse anything?
No. Yeah. Yeah. It was horrible. Yeah.
What kind of vetting are you guys doing if you're not requiring your trials to go through a salesperson before you start?
Great question. That is a great question because recruiting has a huge fraud problem. So we allow someone to start a trial. The question was like, how are you vetting people? And just letting them start a trial. So they have to verify their email before they can log in. But we noticed that was killing actual login amounts. So we created a manual link in Salesforce for sales reps to manually verify someone's trial. So that was the first step. We have someone verify their information. We also have a quality team, which is just our support team that also does quality. And they go through and review every single customer with like a set process every single trialer, that we sort of set up. So they look to see if they're a real business. They look to see, any contact information. Does their phone number match up with their name if they leave a voicemail? Things like that. We've got it pretty much down to a science now, but we do have to be super careful because there's a lot of scamming. People are able to go in and post jobs live on job boards, and a lot of those are sometimes like administrative assistant, and then they'll get people's contact information and scam them. We also do have fraud occasionally where someone will go in and use someone else's credit card to sign up and buy that. So we're able to pretty much single those out if it's a same day sign up. If you see a trialer come in and convert the same day, come on. It's probably not real unless they're like super passionate and found out about you guys somewhere else, But that's a huge red flag for us as well. But we don't do a ton of barriers to entry in terms of like the actual form or the sign up process because we want to get them in there and then kind of figure out what they're doing. But for us, we just don't let their jobs go live to the job boards until we've actually vetted them. And that can take like 48 hours, which is actually a huge problem for us. It's like an external problem because if people don't see candidates in their account, they have a really hard time finding the value in our software. And that's an external problem we just can't resolve, right? So we do everything we can to mitigate that. I would like to see more dummy data personally, and I don't know if that's something anyone's doing in their trials. I would love to know. We have a sample job, but I would love to see candidates just kind of in there and more dummy data and things like that, but we just haven't done that yet. So if anyone's doing that, please let me know. Yeah, so if this is all very overwhelming, start small so you can go from a bike to a motorcycle. in no time. Analyze your user data every step of the way. These are guide views, but this is super important to just keep a pulse. If you find a trialer who's like a power user, just go in and see what they're doing every day. It's actually kind of fascinating. I don't know. I think it is. I don't know. Analytics give you answers, always. Like I said, I thought that walkthroughs were like the best thing that ever happened to me. And turns out they were like nothing, really. They were helpful, but they were definitely not the answer I was looking for. Turns out that insane workflow that I showed you with the yikes on top of it was what I needed, which is way harder than building walkthroughs, but that's what happens. So what to measure, right? I've talked a lot about the different options and where you can look for data, but like what actually tells you, it's actually a huge synthesis of information. You're looking in a lot of different places and it kind of sucks, but that's just the way of the road. Email interactions, are the emails that you're sending getting opened and clicking through? Are your users able to complete your KCAs? What are active trialers doing? If they're dropping off, why? Why are they dropping off? We notice a direct correlation between me screwing up a workflow and people not getting emails when their trial was about to expire to them not purchasing after their trial expired. Right? So don't make a mistake. An increase in subs. If you put something in your trial and you change something, make sure you demarcate the day that you added that in so that you know, hey, like I put in a little welcome message pop-up and on the 30th, and now I have an increase in subs by the end of the month or the quarter or whatever. So did she buy? Did our sweet little Danielle buy? She did, yay. This is really Danielle. She's an HR director at Trust HCS. She's an actual customer. And I love her. She's great. That's all I have. I just wanted to give her a shout out because she actually was a trialer and she bought, and she's been around forever. So there's actually like proof in the pudding and it feels really good to actually see those successes. So quick wrap up, all the things that I've been saying for the past forever. And keep the customer in mind at all times, because that's ultimately why you're building your product. That's why you're analyzing user data. If you think about, like what Wade said, if you think about what you want or what you think customers want, you're probably maybe not wrong, but you never know. So I just like to keep them in mind all the time. And even talking to customers to help you increase your trial is definitely beneficial. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I would definitely start somewhere. I would look at what your current customers are doing, and I'm sure if you know your app well, like your core loop, right? Like what makes people successful or your aha moment. You can also ask sales and customer success, like what do people love what like makes them super excited when they're on an onboarding call and they're like, hey, did you know you can automatically request referrals in the job creation process? And they're like, oh yeah. So like, ask them for that information stuff too, because that'll give you a good, base, like anecdotal base point for sure. Yeah, there's no point in just kind of granularly going. I mean, not that there's no point, but it'll be exhausting and your mind will fall out of your ears. Yeah.
I had a question. You said you were able to automate the Zap to HubSpot.
Yes.
A little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We use Zapier for, it's Zapier, right? Not Zapier. It's Zapier. Okay. Thank you, product people. So we automate basically whenever there's a poll, we create a visitor report. Everyone who clicked that answer to that poll gets put into a Zap that then goes to HubSpot, and they're enrolled in a workflow through HubSpot, and then the email goes to them through there. We use that for MPS as well, so if you guys have MPS set up through Pendo, we have a Zap going to HubSpot right now, but Advocately is also building out an integration. So we're asking our promoters for reviews on like G2 Crowd and stuff like that, and then we have for our detractors, we have an automatic email I built out coming from our VP of success that's saying like, hey, what happened? We've gotten a great response rate from those and a ton of feedback. So if you're not like following up with your promoters in any way, I definitely recommend using those apps to do that. I actually had to purchase the paid version of Zapier because we were getting so many responses. So definitely recommend doing that. Sorry I didn't have this up before, but this is my dog. Just wanted to share her with everybody. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for sitting through like back-to-back presentations. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, feel free to come say hi. Thank you.